Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's online presentation, Workplace Inclusion, a few things you can do without having to wait for top management. Today we have an excellent speaker, but before we get into it, we would like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 is hosted at CHIO, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We also honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land as well. My name is Andrew Tomeyer, Education Coordinator with N4. I use the pronouns he, him, and I will be hosting and moderating today's presentation. My co-hosts are Colleen Drake and Mariah Maddock. We'll be monitoring the Q&A box today and making sure all the technical stuff in the background is good. I'm pleased to introduce you to today's speakers, Michaël Séguin, who will be our main speaker today, alongside Christine Corey, who will be providing additional points on the discussion presented by Michael from a healthcare perspective. Michaël Séguin is an assistant professor at the St. Paul University School of Transformative Leadership and Spirituality. He currently leads a SSHRC-funded research in partnership with N4 about inclusion in Ontario-based settlement agencies. Christine Corey is N4's manager in health equity and diversity, and again, will be providing the healthcare perspective of how workplace inclusion can occur within such a setting. Please feel free to turn on your cameras, and thank you again for joining us today. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our N4 platform. We'll share this with you as soon as it becomes available. Should there be any technical issues during this webinar, we will inform you with details for an alternate makeup session. And before we begin today's event, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to our platform features to help enhance your participation experience. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write your questions in the Q&A window. We know sometimes many of you might have the same question or be interested in a particular response, so today you have the option to upvote a question. Please upvote questions you're interested in hearing the answer to, and we will prioritize which questions we pose to the speakers first. Our speakers today have no conflicts of interest to declare, and with that said, let's jump right into today's presentation. We will have Michaël's presentation, followed by a brief healthcare context from Christine. Then we'll have a Q&A discussion among the audience. And with that said, thank you again today, Michaël, and please take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'll just share my slideshow. So here we go. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today to talk about workplace inclusion. To introduce a bit more who I am, I'd like to say just a few things. The first thing is that
excuse me, Michaël, sorry to interrupt. Just switch the presentation mode and the slides.
Oops.
It's okay.
Is it better that way?
Yep. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm a professor at St. Paul University in the Faculty of Human Sciences. I'm a sociologist of race and ethnic relations by training. I'm also a researcher specializing in the field of equity, diversity, and inclusion, especially in the third sector, so settlement agencies, universities, public organizations as such. I'm the son of dairy farmers from southwest of Quebec. Part of the example I will present today also drawing on my own experience as part of an intercultural marriage. My wife is Moroccan, so we kind of have a daily practice of interfaith and cross-cultural dialogues, and from time to time conflict too. And I'm the father of a wonderful son who's an expert at bargaining. Yes, he's 4 years old, so at that age, oh gosh, they are so good. And I'm also a proud member of N4. So this is a bit my background. So from where I'm coming also as a white male part of the settler majority, coming to issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So what I want to share with you today is a brief definition of what is workplace inclusion, so to give us some kind of parameters of what we're talking about. to explore a bit more what is allyship and the various shape that allyship can take. And finally, a few strategies that can make a difference in the lives of people that are that are part of equity-seeking groups. And so I'll do that in 3 parts. First, a word about inclusion. Second, a word about allyship. And then finally, I'll end up with a few words on how to turn allyship into inclusive leadership. And then I'll be glad to have some reaction from Christine and some questions coming from all of you, the participants. And so let's start with workplace inclusion. But, before doing that, and because I'm not a big fan of talking to myself alone. I like things to be a bit interactive. We'll use a platform today. We'll clap for me to know a bit more about yourself and your expectation about this webinar. And so there's many different ways to access these interactive platforms. If you're tech savvy, you scan the QR code. If not, you can find in the chat a link. You can click on it to access the online survey that I will give to you in a moment. Or you can go to wooklab.com and enter the code for today's meeting, which is N4EDI. So, oh, wow, you're so good at with tech. Already 50 people connected. That's awesome. You're better than my students at St. Paul. Oh, no, I shouldn't say that. Some are very good with technology. So, I'll just wait a few more seconds for people to connect. So either way, QR, the link in the chat, or wooklab.com, so WOOCLAP.com, and you enter the code N4EDI. So let's start with a first question. We'll do it simple. I have 5 questions for you. So the first one is, what does the term EDI make you think of in 2 or 3 words? So we see so far fairness is scoring very high, diversity, respect, belonging, justice, community. Respect. So, and much more. I mean, we're a big crowd today. So very basic concept that we will unpack in a few seconds about, how EDI is about belonging, justice, fairness, respect, fairness, but also how can we make a difference without having to wait for top management to do that. I'll ask you now a second question, which is, what is your level of experience and knowledge with EDI, from very high to low, with an option of, I'm just so tired and bored of hearing about EDI for various reasons. Wonderful. So we have some people who are very, very good expert at it. A good 30% that is pretty involved, knowledgeable about it, willing to learn more. Some that feel some concern, would like to learn a bit more. Some that are new to this field, and some who may be very used to that field and a bit tired of it too, and tired of talks that leads to no result. Great. A third question, which is just for me to situate a bit more who I'm talking for, what is your main sector of activity? So lots of people from the settlement sector, lots too from the healthcare sector, a few from education, a few from the public service, and some from other. So this presentation will be a bit more customized to the need of the healthcare sector, but is applicable to all sectors, you'll see. And finally, two last questions. We'll do again a word cloud. What do you hope to gain from this webinar in 2 or 3 words? I know 2, 3 words is not a lot, but what are you expecting from this presentation? So far I see tools, strategies, actionable steps, action, awareness, information, understanding, some more strategies, accountability, practical strategies. So that's where it will be a split of a bit of theory and concept, just to understand a bit more what is inclusion and allyship, and some good strategies that you can use and that you can customize to the need of your own place. And finally, one last question again to help you know a bit who's in the room, in the virtual room. Which of the following equity-seeking groups, if any, do you belong to? And you can click more than one. So lots of women, lots of people of color too, some indigenous people, some member of the LGBTQ community, some people with disability, and of course, my list is not exhaustive at all. Some people who belong to other equity seeking groups or are not listed here. Perfect. So, I mean, do not hesitate to refer to your own experience, have you react to this presentation and as you may have more questions to ask in the Q&A box. And so, before we start with inclusion, let's go for a very brief definition of diversity. So diversity being, according to the South African scholar Nkomo, any attributes people use to tell themselves that other person is different. And so diversity is a lot about difference. And it's also a difference that can be seen in a positive way, but also that can be used as a tool, as a weapon to stigmatize other people. And so when we talk about diversity, we're inevitably talking about relationship of power, who is privileged, who's oppressed in various ways. And the wheel of power and privilege that you have there help us to see a few of those markers of diversity that may change from workplace to workplace or from context to context, but that often goes back to, issues of language, gender, citizenship, skin color, education, ability, disability, sexuality, and gender, diversity, including neurodiversity, mental health, and body side. And we can add to that social class and other different markers. So that when I'm referring to diversity, I have this wheel of power in mind that we see other people as different. And because as part of a group, we see them as different, we have some privilege and other might be stigmatized, oppressed because of this way of building how we see reality. And my main focus today is on inclusion. And so what is inclusion? A definition that is starting to become mainstream in the academic literature is coming from the optimal distinctiveness theory that define inclusion as an experience where people can fulfill two fundamental needs. The first one being the need for belongingness, to be part of something bigger, to be part of a collective, and the need for uniqueness, to be able to be distinct, to be unique from others. And so if you don't have both, you're not in a situation of inclusion. If you feel in your workplace that you cannot belong and that who you are, the various identities that you want to bring are not welcome, well, you're simply excluded, you're marginalized. If you are able to bring what is unique about you, let's say your religion or your sexual identity, but that at the same time you don't have access to information that could help you do your work or influence decision making, if you feel that you're not part of the collective, you're a different person, we like you very much as you are, but we don't really want you to be part of the whole, we're in a situation that is often referred to as differentiation or tokenism. We might very glad to have a Black woman on board, but it's good only for marketing pictures. Another scenario is assimilation. It's when you really belong to the collective, but in order to belong, you have to hide who you are. You have to hide your sexual orientation, that you have a disability, or your faith practice, stuff like that. And so that's not even better. When in a melting pot scenario, you cannot really exist as who you are. Whereas inclusion, which is kind of more the fruit salad scenario, is when everybody can come, be who they are, and belong to the bigger whole. And so when we're looking at inclusion in terms of either belongingness and uniqueness, we'll ask questions such as, I am treated as a valued member of my work group. Do I feel that I belong in my work unit? I am connected to my work group. And you can also ask, do I believe that I am where I am meant to be? Is this the right place for me? If yes, I feel that I belong. And finally, do I feel that people really care about me in this group? If they care about me, again, I feel that I belong. And the question that we can ask to assess if there is space for uniqueness is that, can I bring aspect of myself to this work group that others in the group don't have in common with me? Can I share my faith practice? Can I share my reality as a parent in that group if others are not parents? I say that, but by the same token, we can ask questions such as, is it possible for me to express my views when I know that people don't share them? Will people listen to me as I share those views? Do I feel comfortable expressing ideas that are different from the way people see how we need to lead a project, for example? Can I share my perspectives on work-related issues that are different from the take of other members of the team? And when I see that my team is focusing too much on only one avenue that might be customized only to the need of the one particular group, is it possible for me to bring a different point of view, to shake a bit the team, to see things differently? If yes, you're in a scenario where it's possible for you, at least partially, to be yourself, to bring your whole self to work. But inclusion in the workplace is not only about your own work group. I mean, at the end of the day, inclusion is really something that you feel. You feel included or not, or you feel excluded. But your work group, yes, has a huge role to play into that. But your leader, your team leader, has also a role to play to create a space where people can be themselves and can feel that they belong. The organization itself has a role to play in adopting policies and practices, in offering training to managers and leaders in order for them to be inclusive in the way they lead. And of course, more broadly, society has a role to play, the government has a role to play to encourage, to foster inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And so, three things before we jump to the allyship part and some more practical way of working. let's address what are the main barriers to inclusion in the workplace. And then according to various studies, and I'm quoting here Bernstein and colleagues, there are three main things that do prevent inclusion. The first one is cell segregation. And it's this tendency that people have to be attracted by people who look like themselves. It's not necessarily that they intentionally want to exclude other, but our brain is wired to function, to feel safe with people who look like us in terms of sex, in terms of color, in terms of social background, in terms of education. We human beings tend to go the easy way and to be led to people who looks like us, who think like us. And so to be an ally, to make a difference in the workplace implies to be intentional in our struggle about this tendency to self-segregation. But another level that is related to the first one, and that is also connected, that is also a bit different, is this cross-cultural communication apprehension that we share, or not all of us, but that many of us share. So especially when we don't have skills in cross-cultural communications, or when we don't know about a different group, let's say member of the LGBTQ community, or people with a disability, it's really easy for us to feel a need to self-protect and not to engage with what is different, because we're anxious of how we'll be received. We're anxious of making mistakes. And because sometimes of the political correctness that is there, where we don't want to be stuck in a situation when we look ridiculous. So again, to be an ally implies to go against that tendency. Well, we can get some more skills, but we need to accept also that we'll make some mistake from time to time. Those two levels, the first two levels are straightforward, normal, but it's already work to go against them. The third level is a bit more tricky. It's the level of stereotypes and stigmatization. So again, what is preventing inclusion is all those stereotypes, all those bias that we have in our head. Some unconscious, other a bit more conscious, but that we're not necessarily able to, or not necessarily willing to get rid of. And so not being willing to forget or to deconstruct those labels is a real problem. So a very common label is to think that when there's an affirmative action program in place, to think that beneficiaries of this program are people who are incompetent. That's a very blunt stereotype. That does not apply at all, in fact. I mean, it's when, even in case of affirmative action, usually people, I mean, that's the law, are selected on the basis of merit. And so we need to work, again, those stereotypical image that we have in our mind to embrace the reality of what it is to be a Black person, what it is to be a person with a disability, and what kind of obstacles you face. So that's hard work that we have to do. And let's have a look a little bit more on what it is in that context to be an ally. And what I want to do is first to share a quite straightforward and simple definition of allyship, and to look at how is it possible to develop into an ally, because it's not something we're born with to be an ally. It's something that we develop through practices of solidarity over time. And so I'm using here the definition of Sahad in her book, Me and White Supremacy. And she says that allyship is the active, consistent, and challenging practice of unlearning and reevaluating, in which a person in a position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group. So already we have some pretty important keywords here. It's something active. It's something we need to work on. We need to be consistent over time in that. And it's challenging. You need to step outside of your comfort zone if you want to be an ally, because you need to unlearn some of the stuff that you knew and evaluated from the perspective of the people you want to be in solidarity with. Allyship is not an identity. It's not something that you can claim in your CV. Oh, wow, I'm an ally. No, it's a lifelong process of building relationships. It's something that others sees you as. Other people acknowledge you, and people from marginalized group acknowledge you as an ally to their struggle, an ally to their cause, and that is coming through relationship building that needs to be based on trust, on consistency, and on accountability. And again, allyship is not something that is self-defined. It's through work, through efforts that you can be recognized as an ally by other people. And so another way to understand it, what is allyship, is through this coin model in a paper from Nixon. And so in society, some people are more privileged than others. Some people are more oppressed than others. But to be an ally is aware of where are your privilege. And so as a white man, I know that through the system of systemic racism, of white supremacy, I know that I'm privileged, that I can make my way more easily through the system. And the same thing apply as a male. I know that it's more easy to navigate the system. People believe me or more easily if I say that, you know, I'm a leader because of unearned attribute, unearned privilege. I mean, it's not because I'm particularly bright or good at what I'm doing, but even before entering the room, the fact of being male and white put me in a privileged position. And I know that the flip side of it is that it's more difficult for people who aren't white, aren't men, to make their place in the system, that they are facing unjust structural obstacles. And so my role, my first role as an ally, is to understand where is my place in the system and what are other people coping with, and to see how is it possible to reverse, to destroy those systems of oppression that are making life miserable for others. And so the starting point is this coin. Where do I have privilege, and what are the consequences of those privilege through various system of oppression? But this is more easily said than done. And to be honest about my own journey as a white male who tries to be an allyship, especially with people victim of racism. And and so that's why it's important also to keep in mind that to be an ally is something that we develop over time. And I really like the model that I will share with you in a moment, coming from a US scholar, Edwards, who says that there are three types of people who are aspiring to be allies. People who are slowly but surely looking at both sides of the coin. The first type of ally, and many of us, people who are from the majority and more privileged will start there. We'll start being aspiring allies for self-interest. So we'll come to allyship because we want to protect people that we care around us. That was my own journey. I wanted to protect my wife, who was a newcomer, who's racialized, who's part of a religious minority in this country. And my first goal was to protect Salima. I was not that much thinking about the system. I was just thinking about what can I do for one person. And there's some problems coming with that posture, and we'll look at that in a moment. A second step, as I continued my own journey through allyship, was to become an aspiring ally for altruism. Sounds a bit nice, altruism, but it's not that nice. And you know, allies for altruism are mostly motivated by the feeling of guilt. Once they start realizing all those unearned privilege that they have and how messy the group of their history has been, how violent it has been, they feel some guilt. And so they want to make a difference, often through saviorism and to this more paternalistic posture, or how can I save other, how can I make a difference in their life? Not so much in consultation with them, but just going and saving them. Often also to be praised by the group. Oh, you're not like the other white person, you're so nice. This is a step in the development of allyship, but with it come also some problems. And the last step, which is more in alignment with the definition we saw in the previous slides, is to be an aspiring ally for social justice, which is when you start being truly aware of the various systems of oppression you're part of, and when you want to make a difference, not only for marginalized people, but also for the majority. When you start realizing that this system is fucked up, it doesn't work. It's oppressing a lot of people, but it's also keeping the majority in a position of ignorance where they don't understand what other people are dealing with, what other people are going through. And when you become an ally for social justice, you want to change this system in partnership for the greater good of all, of equity-seeking groups, but also of your own group to some extent. And let's look shortly at a few characteristics of those various type of allyship, and then we'll get to the very practical stuff of what we can do. So, I mean, when you're an ally for self-interest, again, your first interest is the people you care for, you care about. And often you're simply an ally for a person, to ally with someone around yourself. And you're not so much ally with, but you're allied over a target group. Your focus is on the bad apples in the basket. Oh yeah, Canadian society is not that racist, but there's a bunch of, extremist right-wing people. Oh, the one on the convoy, that stuff. So you look at those people and you point them as the problem, but you don't look at the system. And so your view of justice is, again, we just need to get rid of the few bad apples, not to change the system. And you assume that you're a good person. I don't make mistake. I'm not sexist. I'm not racist. Other are the problem. And I don't have privilege. That's not an issue. I'm born here. That's okay. So this allyship position is pretty tricky, but it's always, it's not always, but it's often where people belonging to the majority will start with. And, even for people who are oppressed and marginalized, when you don't know about the reality of other group, let's say people with disability or people who are part of the LGBTQ community, it's always easy to think based on your position of privilege in that particular system of oppression. So along this walk to become an ally, the second position, the second type of ally is to be an ally for altruism. So your motivation is to do that for others. You do that for a particular group. That was one of my way of thinking. I wanted to be an ally to Muslims when I realized that my wife was facing Islamophobia. And, I had the feeling that I was working for members of this target group. I was not so much working in partnership with them, but for them. I was the kind of special representative of that group, willing to call some shot and to say to some white folks how wrong they were. And so my focus were my own group, my own white group, and how problematic is their way of seeing Islam, for example. And my view of justice was the need for justice for Muslim, for this marginalized group. And, when it comes to mistake, when you're an ally for altruism, it's not that easy to admit them, that easy to admit that even with your good willing, you do microaggress people from time to time, especially when you come with this savior position and you struggle with critique. I don't want to hear that. I'm doing the best. I feel that I can sleep well at night. Don't come to criticize me. And but at the same time, you do all of that because you feel guilty about your privilege. And you try to distance yourself and to show that you're not like the other white folks. And the last position, which is kind of coming to more maturity in terms of allyship, is through being an ally for social justice. So you're aware that you do that for others, but you also do that for yourself. You do that for, I do that for my son because I want him to grow in a better society. You know that you're not simply ally to a group, but to something bigger. Um, in my case, my fight is slowly but surely coming. How do we change workplaces to make them more inclusive? Of course, for Muslims, of course, for people of color, but also for everyone that is belonging to a marginalized group. And so your relationship with the group you want to ally with is changing too, because you work with them and not for them. And you're aware that you don't have to take the lead on everything, and that oftentimes you have to follow their lead on what they see as the solutions to the issues that they are facing. But the focus becomes systemic. We know that the system is broken. We know that living in a settler society is problematic. We need to decolonize it. We need to reform this white supremacy, change it, to reform the systems of where heterosexuals are privileged. And so we need social justice for all. And in that paradigm, I keep making mistakes, but I try. It's not always easy. I'm not sure as I'm always successful at it, but you see critiques as a gift, as a way to improve yourself. And you try as much as possible to admit your mistakes, because you start to understand that they are a way to liberate yourself from your bias, from some of those part of my education I grew up with, and that might be wrong when it comes to the wide history I was educated with, where you don't know about First Nations, you don't know about people from other countries. So there's this old mood where you start seeing your privilege, but using them to change things and changing the system. And so how is it possible to be an ally? Let's hit the ground with some practical stuff. What can I do as a settlement worker, as a healthcare worker? Well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I will probably list a few things that you're already doing, and that's good news. It's not something awesome, or tremendously new to be an ally, but it's, to some extent, it's to be a good and decent human being. But the starting point is to name what are your motivations. Why do I want to help other? What are my goals behind that? To be aware of why I do it, and to avoid potentially a position where I would be acting instead of others rather than acting with them. A second thing is, if that was your position, if that is your practice, at least that's mine, that was mine, that is mine from time to time, stop trying to save or to fix others. As white folks, we have to be part of the solution, but we don't have to think about the whole solution to all the mess that white folks created throughout history. And so we need to get to know people from different groups. We need to get to know their daily reality. You need to get to know something as simple as get to know your colleagues, get to know how they see the world, get to know their culture. And by the same token, you will get to know the obstacles that they are facing. And talking with them is a way to self-educate yourself as an ally, but there's also other way to do it through this webinar, to other formal education opportunity. But it's the real goal behind this education is start seeing the systems. Start seeing the systems of oppression like sexism, racism, ableism, capacitism, and how they create life, how they make life more difficult for people who are different from you, and start unlearning what you knew about your reality, to start knowing a bit more in more complex terms how the system is working to privilege some and to oppress, marginalize others. A fourth thing that you can do, and it's all interconnected, is to be very humble in that journey. because you will make mistakes. I keep making mistakes. I keep microaggressing my students from time to time. Not that it's a fatality, but it's part of what is it. It is, again, to be a human being, to be raised in a certain way, having your brain wired in a certain way. But what makes a real difference is to be seeking to change slowly but surely, and to be willing to get feedback from other people, to be able to correct yourself, to be able to amend your worldview as we go. Something that is very important too is to what I call filling the blanks, to understand what is behind the silence of people, especially when you go to a meeting and you realize that it's always the same people who are talking, and maybe the same people share the same attributes, and realize that all the people who are not part of the white majority are not talking. So it's really important to understand reality from the perspective of people who are different from you, and to understand it in situation. Try to understand what are thinking people who don't speak up their mind, and how can we bring their perspective in the meeting if that is what they want. um, and through that, it's also very important, again, to be supporting and to be able to open doors for other when they ask to. So the idea is not, again, to save and open all the doors, but if people are coming to you because they feel that there's a real need to, let's say, launch a new initiative in your workplace, to have kind of, for example, more culturally sensitive healthcare, well, how can you support? How can you help this new initiative? What kind of information can you share with others around you, so that they might be more part of insiders when decisions are taking? How can you connect people around you to different resources, to different colleagues who might make a big difference in their career advancement? So networking is something very important in the workplace, especially for people who want to climb the ladder. How can you help people around you through networking initiatives, is if it is what they want? And the last thing is calling out microaggressions and macroaggressions. So how can you use your privilege to make a difference in the life or people who are being microaggressed in the workplace, who are living various forms of oppressions? And I'd like to spend maybe 5 minutes on this, looking at a few concrete strategies to deal with microaggression. So I could talk a lot about the macro side of it, when the system or the business is oppressing people, or when society is oppressing people, but I will just focus my attention to microaggressions here. And I'm using the work of Daryl Hsu and colleagues, who have been developing what they call micro-intervention. And that's a pretty interesting concept, this idea of micro-intervention. So how can you make a difference in your workplace, in situation, on the floor, in the day-to-day, and what are macro intervention is really, it's not to remain silent when you see something, that when you see an attack, or when you see an invalidation of a colleague. And micro interventions are ways to validate what your colleagues are living, to value who they are as person, to affirm their identity as member of marginalized group, to support, to encourage them, to help them to feel that they are not alone. And Daryl Hsu and colleagues are developing 4 main strategies when it comes to micro intervention. The first one is to make the invisible visible. The second one is to disarm microaggression. The third one is to educate the perpetrator, and the last one is to seek external intervention. I will give you a few examples of what I mean in very concrete terms about these. So when we look at the first strategy, to make the invisible visible, let's say that you're entering into a room, you see a white doctor with a black patient, and the doctor is asking, "Oh, by the way, where are you from?" And in every microaggression, the problem is not so much, not only what is communicated, but the message, the hidden message behind the communication. And so, if you're being asked all day long, every day, where are you from? The message you're getting is that you're an alien. You will never be a real Canadian because we keep asking you where you're from because you're Black. And so one way to deal with that, let's say you're the room as whatever your title, is to undermine the meta communication. So you can say, for example, to the physician, well, you don't know where she's from. She might be from your country, from the same country you are from. Another way to do that is to name what's going on and make the meta communication explicit. So you can say something like, hey, doctor, are you saying that this person doesn't belong here? Another strategy that is part of making the invisible visible is to challenge stereotype. So, well, she might be Black, but that doesn't mean that she's brown, that she's born abroad. Another strategy, again, as part of another tactic, as part of this making the invisible visible, would be to broaden the ascribed trait to a universal behavior. Hey, doctor, Black people have been around in this country for 400 years old, 400 years. So just again, making explicit that there's more going on than what is being said. And another way that is maybe more banal, you see how you can use that in the situation where you're in, is to ask for clarification. So I could say, if I was entering the room to the physician, do you realize that this kind of question entails that people who are, for what do you understand what this kind of questions means for people who are being asked that every day? And just for the person, to make the person aware of what's going on, to what might be a very well-intentioned comment, but that might really end up being a kind of aggression when you leave it day and day again. Another way to, another strategy is, sorry, I need to find the good paper. Another strategy is to disarm microaggressions. And so let's use another example. You're next to the coffee machine in the restroom, in a lounge in your in your workplace, and colleagues are chatting about a new hire, and who's a person with a visible disability, and one person say, "Ha, he's got this job only because he's handicapped." And again, what is the meta communication? What is the message behind that? That is pretty invalidating and harmful. It's that people with disabilities only receive job opportunities through accommodation, or rather than through their own merits. They receive a kind of special treatment, meaning that they might be incompetent. And of course, that's not the case. So there's something pretty aggressive beyond this message. So what can you do? A first strategy would be to express disagreement. So just say bluntly to this colleague, we'll call him George. George, I just don't agree with what you said. And then enter into a more detailed conversation about why you don't agree with what George just said. Another strategy would be to state values and set limits. So you can say, George, our respect and tolerance are important for me in my life. Please, could you think twice before making that kind of comments about people with disability? Another way, that is probably the easiest way, would be to use an exclamation, would be to say, oh, shh, and you can use nonverbal language at the same time. Oh, come on. Just to interrupt the flow, not to be a passive bystander when you're watching something that is offensive to someone that might well not be there, but just to break the flow and manifest that something is wrong about it. So it can also be through nonverbal communication, like no, shaking your head, but showing that there's something wrong. Another way would be to interrupt and redirect. Whoa, let's not get there, please, George. Maybe we can focus on something else for today. So you avoid the tough conversation, but you still make him and people around him realize that, no, I don't want to go down that road. And a last thing that you can do could be to remind people of the rules. I'm not sure that's the most fancy way to get new friends, but you might say, no, sorry, that is going against the code of conduct of this workplace. Or, we have a statement about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Going down that road is not honoring it at all. So, I mean, you choose the best way to go. So that was the second strategy. The last two ones are, again, to educate the perpetrator, and the last one, to seek external intervention. So to educate the perpetrator, let's use a third example. A patient make the following comment to a nurse, and let's say you're walking by as a worker, as a physician, as the janitor, doesn't matter. The patient is saying to a nurse that is wearing the hijab, oh, come on, free yourself and remove that head cover from your head. So again, the hidden message, the meta communication is pretty clear. Muslim women are oppressed and in need of liberation. So as a white patient, I will offer you the privilege to free yourself. And so what can you do, let's say, if you're walking in that room? Well, the first thing to do could be to point out communality. So you want to dismantle the stereotype and to say to this patient, what you said is just a very nasty stereotype about Muslim. Did you know that Miriam, the nurse, did work so hard and face so many obstacles to get where she is? To show that she might be oppressed, but not by the people that you think of, and that she has a real agency to get where she is right now. Another way could be to appeal to the offender's values and principles. Let's say you know the patient, and you tell him, I know how much you value freedom for all and you value human rights, but what makes you think that Muslim women cannot free themselves by themselves? Why do they need comments as such the one that you make? Another way could be to differentiate between intent and impact. So saying something like, I think that you didn't realize that the comment that you just made was really demeaning for Miriam. And that because not all Muslim women are oppressed, or are not are oppressed the way you think they are by their religion. A last strategy for this educating the offender would be to promote empathy. So to say something like, the majority of Muslim Canadian Muslim women don't see themselves as oppressed. How would you feel if I was assuming that that because of your outfit you need to be free? So flipping the comment on its head to bring it back to the person who made it. And another way would be to point out the benefit of changing one's view. I know that you're a family man or woman. I know that you value your family. And, learning about your stereotypes could be a good way to be a better parent. Something like that. Again, it's highly contextual. You know the people you're dealing with. You know what they will accept, what they won't accept. But that's another strategy. That's another set of strategies to be an ally. And the last one is about seeking external intervention. So whatever the case, you might go to your manager to just share what you saw and what it's possible to do to make a difference in the life of the people who are being oppressed on on the floor, on the work floor. Another way would be to report the act. So to use some of the forms, anonymous form existing in the workplace to report what you saw. And again, if it's something that you're living yourself as member of a marginalized group, well, you can seek therapy, you can seek support from other colleagues, you can set up a buddy system, or yourself as an ally, you can set up a buddy system. So having people that you would listen to as they share their work experience, as they debrief to you and help you better understand what the difference you can do. And you can also, if you're a member of an enterprise group, attend a support group looking for ways to make a difference in your workplace. So sorry, that was a very rough and fast overview of those different strategies, but just to say that there are many, many ways to deal with harmful situation in the workplace. And when we do that, we're entering into the territory of allyship. And for people who are in, for example, project managers or team managers or coordinator, there's a next step that they could take. This next step would be to become an inclusive leader. And an inclusive leader is someone that is already an ally or that is working to become an ally, but that is also working to make a difference in the workplace, that is bridging the organizational structures and policy and trying to make a difference in the work group and in the interaction among employees in this work group. And again, to be an inclusive leader is more or less the same. You have to travel the same road that you'll travel to be an ally. You need to be aware of your own bias and counteract them. You need to engage with people of different groups to get to know their reality. But you do it also as someone who wants to get them involved in the decision-making process, who wants to get their knowledge, their input, their experience in the decision-making process in order for decisions to reflect the diversity of people who are sitting around the table. And when you do that, you need to be extra careful of who is your in-group, who is your inner circle of people that you consult usually when you have decision to make, to expand the circle, to make sure that you have people with a broad variety of identities and ideas and perspective about life in this inner circle. And so inclusive leadership is about that, being aware of people with different point of view, encouraging the expression of those various point of view, validating people who are expressing view that are different, including views that are different from yours, making sure that you invite them to share the decision-making process, making sure that the internal processes, for example, the recruitment process or the promotion process within your unit is fair and that is clear for everyone to be able for them to progress. And again, to value the perspective of different people. When we do that, and that's one of the selling points of this whole idea of inclusion, and I'm finishing on this, we will be able to create a workplace where people feel safe, psychologically safe, where people feel engaged in their work because they feel valued, they feel that they have a space, a voice. Well, people will feel well because there will be more space for well-being because they can bring their whole self to work, where people can get more creative and innovative because they will be ready to start trying new stuff because they have the freedom to be who they are. And that in itself is something of the most important. You will be able to strengthen helping behavior within your team because people will start to support each other as they start listening to each other in who they are in their various identities. People will be more willing to learn from mistakes and failures because we won't punish people who fail, but we are willing to learn from it. And finally, this might well end up in a better work climate and in better work performances. And before I leave the floor for Christine, just a quick promotion. if you're interested in what you've been hearing today, I'm teaching a class on equity, diversity, and inclusion within the graduate diploma and master degree program in transformative leadership and spirituality at St. Paul. And so if at some point in your career, you'd like to develop more yourself into an inclusive leader, this program might be for you, and I encourage you just to have a quick look atustpaul.ca to know a bit more about the programming we're offering at the School of Transformative Leadership, and we're receiving application for next September right now.
Thank you so much for that, Michaël. That was such an excellent presentation, and it's very, very important to look at all these many different aspects of EDI within your role and to work effectively with leading and working on projects and tasks where everyone's included, and how to recognize where and how barriers and problems can be addressed. There's much to discuss and many questions that can come from this discussion, and thank you again for this amazing presentation. And so attendees, please provide any other questions that you may have to the Q&A box. But before we jump into this, we have the wonderful Christine Corey to provide some reflections on these concepts in that healthcare perspective. And as such, I will pass the virtual podium over to Christine for your thoughts. Take it away.
Great, thanks Andrew, and thank you Michaël. Just so people know, Michaël et moi, on est bilingues, Michaël est francophone. Alors, si vous avez des questions en français, au plaisir de les mettre, on peut répondre en français aussi. So we both speak French, so I was saying we could welcome questions in either language. Yeah, I was scribbling notes, Michaël, as you spoke, and thinking about the work I've done in the healthcare space. I'm trying to promote EDI for a long time. Now is the opportune time. I think a lot of people have said, but I've been trying for years. It's been going on for years. I think there's two factors which are really opening the door a bit more. One is that in the summer of 2020, as George Floyd was murdered, almost every organization, I haven't even encountered a single one, did not put out an EDI statement. We will do better. We acknowledge. And so now's the opportune time for folks to say, at my organization, you made this statement, here's what I'm seeing, that's not congruous. And so there's some momentum there. The other piece that's made this an opportune time is the HHR crisis. So never before have we had so many vacancies in healthcare. We are scrambling to recruit people, but we're also scrambling to retain people. And so if you couch things around that factor, that also, is a motivating factor in organizations to make changes if you're not seeing it organically happen. The one thing I'd say about healthcare too is that I would encourage folks to look at not only the workforce, but engaging their patients and families in this work and having that partnership. Some of the work we did was forming advisory committees and having that lived experience at the table, both from the staff perspective, but also the families who ultimately experience your care. And you gave those examples about patients, and that's important. And there's discrimination. We hear microaggressions that happen both ways, right? We'll have, as you said, patients being asked questions, presumptions on the way they look. There was a great report put out by the Ottawa Urban Indigenous Table called Share Your Story, which talked about these questions Indigenous patients are asked. First question at Trios and Emerge is, how much have you had to drink, or what substances do you use? I've never been asked that, right? So we have these biases and some great work that's been done, but we need to hear their voices directly to act on that, because that's our ultimate mission, of course, in healthcare. I really resonated with me about the inactions and fears. We, as healthcare providers, I'm a nurse by background, we do this Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. And I find sometimes that paralyzes people, like, I better not do something because what if I create harm? But what we have to realize, and you really emphasize, is there's harm ongoing. So, we need to do something. Not doing anything is creating harm. And so sometimes that will be an aha moment for providers to say, oh, right. They never intend. I've never seen a single provider in all my 30 years of experience in healthcare was like, I want to create harm. It's a lot of microaggressions, a lot of opportunities for learning. And so highlighting harm by inaction is another way to get things going. But as we talk about engaging lived experience, I love that how you emphasize that we need to take they're the leaders, we're the supporters as allies. And sometimes that's in baby steps. So in our organization, we had advisory committees, and at first I was somehow the chair of the Indigenous Circle. I am not Indigenous. So slowly there was a trust building, and then we were able to turn over as people trusted the process. They would dip their toes in. Let me go to one meeting and let me see, is this real or is this another one of those? Oh, tell me what you're thinking. Okay, thanks. And they move on to the next shiny object or priority in their life. So sometimes that was my learning, is it can take stages of morphing over that leadership, and that's okay. I also learned, don't always expect people to come to your table, right? That's not good allyship. So sitting on external tables and listening. So Ottawa, where we're located, has the Ottawa Local Immigration Partnership. I sit on that because I really get to hear. I'm there with the police, the schools, and we really get to hear about the issues on the ground from those who are directly provided. And I know we have a lot of settlement workers who are there saying, hey, here's what we're seeing. But right now I'm the only hospital there. So others there's community partners there. They're would welcome you to be on their tables. I'm on a health and wellness table and I'm the only hospital there. There's something wrong with that. We as hospitals need to get out of our comfort zone, and we made these EDI statements. So that's a great way to partner, and then you can work on things collaboratively. Let's see, bias in hiring for sure. We've heard feedback from our families that they look for staff that look like them. And if they see staff that look like them, the anxiety goes from here to here. We had, our focus is on newcomers, maybe some of those visual cues, but we also see that in our gender diverse community, saying, why do I always see stereotypical cisgendered women, and looking for that in the patients you show. We all have websites and social media. So who are you featuring even in there? We do have, especially in pediatrics, they only have one choice in Ottawa. So we know we get the diversity of children, but we tend to always picture the cute little white babies, maybe who have bald heads because they have cancer, because that sells. Who are we picturing? And what's our goal? Is our goal fundraising, or is our goal for our families to feel welcomed and belonging in our space? So I think that's something we learned. And I've seen a great change in the acceptance of that amongst leaderships in healthcare. See, allyship, yeah, it's, as much as we say healthcare talks a lot about, it's in interprofessional work, and there is that hidden hierarchy where we'll have, and I was reading one of the Q&As, a healthcare aide who commented, right? And there is this perceived hierarchy about who's in charge, who makes the decisions. So those are more challenging when even within the organization, how am I giving feedback about it? And, we've done some sessions talking about even how do you word things, and you gave some great examples, Michaël, on how to word things. But sometimes I'll put myself in a position of, what I learned. If you say that, it's less threatening to folks if you can say what I learned over time, and I've gone down that myself too. And what I learned is that's actually offensive, and I know you would feel bad if you knew that. So almost like that self-deprecating, or saying your own learnings opens that up, versus saying, hey, that's a microaggression and that's against policy. People automatically go, I do no harm, I can't admit mistakes, I'm a physician. And especially if you have like a resident who's reporting to that physician, and my evaluation depends on them, wow, that complicates things. And so I liked how you said you can reach out to other people. There's an EDI lead at almost every organization right now. So find out who that is. That's your ally. If you're like seeing people, I saw somebody said there's a lot of people leaving our organization because they're just like, I'm fed up. We had that. We heard about people leaving because, and you spoke to it was a Muslim woman, and she wanted to do her prayers. And every time she said, oh, I'm just going to go off and do my prayer, like, again, right? So there's microaggression over time. She's like, you know what? I don't belong here. I don't need this. I can get a job anywhere. And that's the thing in healthcare. They can get a job anywhere. So we really need to learn. I'd encourage those who work in HR, when you're doing those exit interviews, you know, HR should be looped into that as a neutral person to say, why did they really leave? Because it is challenging to leave an organization, find a new job. It takes effort and so forth. So think about your questions to capture those. Did you have a sense of belonging? Was there things that happened? Right now, I don't think we do a good job of that. Let's see. And yeah, when you go to communities, make sure if you're going to ask that you're actually willing to do the work. So don't, you know, great, I've heard all this input, and then you really don't have a concrete plan on how. What you do might vary, but that you'll have a plan and some resources should be there. Like just don't go in and say, well, I'll figure it out after I know what they want. No, go in saying, what's the structure that's within, and to make sure, because you know, sometimes you only have one kick at the can, and if they say, well, this was tokenism, you've lost them forever. They're just like, I'm out. And I've learned so much from the folks that have led our advisory committees on what are their priorities. And sometimes I have something in my mind, again, right, working on behalf of them. I'm like, oh, we should do this and this and this. And they're like, no, just start with this, Christine. And then sometimes it's really concrete things, right, about that they'll provide. So we're often afraid to ask, what can we do to improve? Because we're afraid of the answers. But take the risk. It's worthwhile. There's learning in that. And sometimes it's like, well, why do we do things? And I've yet to see something that was so out of the realm of possible. In fact, I've seen the opposite, where I feel like they're under asking us for change. So I think people go in saying, oh my God, they're going to ask for the world. They're going to ask us to get, I don't know, somebody different as the CEO because we need somebody else. And that's just not the case. So let's see. Oh, one of the things that came to mind too that we've done is sometimes you'll hear things and it's not the moment. Maybe a physician is asking a patient, it's not the time to interrupt. They're like in emerge, say, and we're doing an interview. You're pulling that emerge physician aside later. Very important to loop back to the person who received the microaggression. So closing that loop. You know, you may say, I saw you be a bit uncomfortable. I noticed it too. And I just want you to know I followed up, and the physician felt really bad and really learned from it, but sorry for your experience. And so acknowledging that and closing the loop is really important healing process for the folks who experience that microaggression. Yeah. So those were my thoughts, Andrew. I hope that was helpful. I know we've got tons of Q&A. I'm keep seeing it pop up. So I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that excellent perspective on looking at these many EDI concepts and how to apply them in a healthcare center and a healthcare professional role. And we hope that the attendees here can take away many of these concepts and elements of the discussion that we've had today. So with that, we can move to our Q&A portion of the webinar. And again, please continue putting your Q&A, your questions into the Q&A box. And with that, we've got this very good story from one of our attendees with respect to being a healthcare worker working predominantly in white hospital. You may have seen the question already, but they've seen 3 colleagues of color come to them in the past few years, all of them experiencing some bullying related to their job, as they were always under deep scrutiny and deep mistrust among their team. And with that, errors or omissions, for example, that may not have been mentioned or may have been played down for a white colleague was being much more of a bigger deal, reported to every authority possible. And a few others have tried to speak up to nurses for these nurses, but the bullying continues behind excuse of professional concerns with regards to that. So how can you disarm this kind of cloaked aggression? And the individual also states that they are also part of a marginalized group facing their own challenges as well. And Michaël, you're on mute.
Thank you. Well, that's that's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have that a very good answer to it. And I mean that first of all, that's a terrible situation, and what you probably try is so the question is who is causing the bullying, and who could be an ally within the institute to make it stop. And I'm very aware that all the more formal processes are often disappointing, but is it possible to find a manager somehow who would understand that and would be able to sit with the bullies and make them understand that what they are doing is not right, it's unfair, and might have consequences for them? Is it possible, if there's any kind of EDI-related office, to get support from there? If it's not within the clinic, the hospital, or the organization, there's always the Ontario Commission for Human Rights. But I know that, who wants to get involved in a fight that will last for 2 years and that might end up not giving that much result at the end of the day? But it might be possible too to go there to get some advice on what is possible. If there's a union and there's at least a member of the union who is a bit more sensitive to that kind of issue, that might be worth talking with the union to see what's possible. So part of what I didn't touch on, but that is also really part of allyship, is really finding who are the other allies around and who can I get on board trying to make a difference. But I know that in some setting, with some powerful actors who are not willing to change and are protecting people who are like them, it's very difficult, heartbreaking. People might leave a few times before everything is settled, but I think that would be my way to explore that. But Christine, maybe you have something more to add, as you know much more the setting than I do.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said, and yeah, I think there's the informal. So some of the key words that I've found are useful is, pointing people, I saw the EDI statement. That's great. Here's what I've seen. So I'm wondering, what is our process for this? Because I'm concerned that I've seen staff leaving, and informally I've heard this. What can I do? What is the process? So asking informally, but linking them to the formal process. Sometimes if you're just, oh, well, haha, mentioning like, I've seen other organizations in the headlines. That's not what I want for our organization, because I think we do this well. And I really, but it needs to be addressed. So what are we doing? So sometimes you need to reframe it a second time, because, what is the currency in your organization? Is it the headlines? Is it the workers are leaving? You may have to try multiple ways to get the attention that obviously this issue deserves. But I think, if you see the informal hasn't worked, it's time to formalize. And so every organization should have a formal process. And if they don't, as Michaël said, there is the Ontario Human Rights. And I can tell you, every organization is fearful of getting that, even though it is a long, arduous. As soon as they get one complete, they're like, oh my gosh, suddenly they're involving their corporate lawyers. And so I think it's a frustrating experience for those who have to undergo it, but it does get their attention. Like that's a big stick, I would say. So, I guess it's up to everybody's individual situation to think if they want to bring out that big stick, but it'll get their attention, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's essentially not a big solid solution, but there are a whole many pathways that can be done to help better the situation. Can be very frustrating, very heartbreaking too. With that, moving to our next question. Is it appropriate for a white colleague supervisor to intervene, address when a microaggressive statement happens and is made by someone who might be experiencing their own internalized racism?
I think that one distinction that we can make that might be useful here is the difference between calling in and calling out. And when you're calling in someone, you're trying to build a relationship and explain to this person why this comment or that behavior was offensive and why there's a need to change. But through a climate of trust, you don't do it publicly. You do that, around a coffee if possible, and to leave space for this person to process and change. Whereas calling out is the stuff that we see more often on the social media, where you make a big statement, you're a racist, this is racist for that and that and that and that, and you want basically to shame or worst case scenario, cancel someone. So, I mean, I don't think that the second scenario is appropriate at all. I mean, in that context, it might be in other, but not in that context. But as so calling in would also depend on what is the relationship. And if the relationship with this person is already really hierarchical, and this person would receive your comment as an order, that's not the best way to go. Then the question would be, could it be possible to find someone else who might intervene and explain to this person that's not the right way to go? So there's a tricky balance to find a way to protect the person from himself or herself, but at the same time, to walk the talk and open his mind about something else. I mean, an example that we do cross often, even in the education sector, is we have a lot of international students, but that might well end up having bias against First Nations because they just got the narrative that they are listening to the media and etc. And so when there's a relationship of trust, it's possible to sit and talk about it. If not, it might be good to find someone else who might be able to have this conversation with the person.
Thank you. And then we have a couple good comments just related to Christine's reflection. So Christine did mention being a partner. This one's from Fiona Murray. Mentioned being a partner of her Ottawa LIP. Just wanted to mention that most areas have a local immigration partnership, which are community partnerships that have a council that's open to new members that prioritize the well-being on immigrants. So you can reach out to your local LIP if that is of interest. This is an individual who is an employee of a different LIP. So feel free, if you are part of a healthcare center, if you're part of such an organization that would like to further learn about the situations within your area, feel free to reach out to them, just an element to highlight. And alongside that, we also have a comment from Deborah Stevens, just stating that LIPs usually have an immigrant advisory table, and they're extremely important to help determine the local direction to provide lived experience and to share challenges within the community.
Andrew, I was just going to add that one of the things I learned at our LIP, and actually it's being echoed right now, we have a school board that's doing a parental input survey, and you get to see other people's comments. The amount of bullying in schools is off the charts. Didn't realize it was that bad till you hear those lived experience. And so we actually did a session, ended up linking our emerge physicians. We're seeing more bullying, physical aggressions resulting in an emerge visit kind of bullying in Ottawa. And so we actually did a joint session with the school board and our emerge to talk about what do we do when this happens, and really highlighting to the school board and being allies to that community and saying to the school board, like this, a response of, well, this is private and we can't discuss this case. No, this is a systemic issue, and we want to know what you're doing at a systemic issue, not only to follow up on the bullies, appropriately so, but what are you doing for the victims to support their mental health well-being? Because now they're scared to go back to school. They went to school trying to belong, and they've ended up with a physical assault. And how are you going to protect them and do that trauma-informed approach with them to reintegrate them to the school in a trusting way? So LIPS, that is a phenomenal learning for us by participating on the LIP, and really showed, and looping it back to the hospital, we're able to say, what are the patterns we're seeing? They're a great source of information.
Thank you, and thank you for that. And one final question before we wrap things up. One that actually came to my mind is, how much and how long should inclusivity training be done for staff? At what point is someone showing that they are fully unbiased? Or is this sort of a constant cycle where they continue to do their best, but they recognize aspects they weren't aware of, learn from it, and continue to improve?
I hope, or I fear, I don't know, but I think that's a continuing process. I mean, it's not that because of the turnover, often new people are coming in, team dynamics may change, and as people are changing, and society itself is changing, we might pay a lot of attention to one group today, and maybe starting to put more attention to another group in a few years. So, and one thing that is difficult about EDI is that diversity is something pretty broad. So to get your head around all the multiple groups involved around it does take time. And I mean, I think one of the challenge to tie into that is that we need to start seeing diversity training not so much something where you check boxes and you gain knowledge, but the place where you can what that is a kind of training for allyship, where you can share and test ideas with others, where you can sit and be intentional about what you do and become more aware also of groups that you know less, but that you would need to discover. And every time we enter into just one identity, there's a whole world to discover. If I'm just going into cultures, I won't be done in this lifetime discovering about different cultures. If I get into the realm of disability, what does it mean to be blind? What does it mean to be deaf? What does it mean to be in a wheelchair? There are umbrella realities that are related, but the detail of that is different. The deaf community has its own culture, its own way of communicating. And so we need to see that as something also exciting, not just something that we feel guilty about. It's a way to travel to some extent. It's about discovering new groups and how to enter into a relationship with those groups. So I fear you and I, and probably Christine too, won't be done in this lifetime, learning about the diversity of people around us and how it's possible to break obstacles that they are facing.
Right. Well, thank you again for such an excellent presentation, and thank you, Christine, as well, for a great reflection on the healthcare perspective on this topic. And with that said, there we go. So with that said, again, thank you so much for participating in today's presentation and engaging with us today. And you're very much welcome again to join us for any of our upcoming events. And feel free to send along Michaël Séguin's presentation on March 15th, where it'll be more focused towards the managers and the leaders of the organization as well. And if you missed any part of today's presentation or would like to watch this session again, we'll be posting the recording to the N4 platform within the next week or so. And we want to continue the dialogue that this webinar started. So we'll be moving further discussions to our N4 online moderated discussion forum called the Meeting Place. And feel free to interact on there when we post this webinar and the resources that we will also curate alongside this. And you can find them all as well within our resource toolkit on our N4 website, alongside the links that we will share with the on-demand version of this presentation. So if you haven't yet, please sign up to newcomernavigation.ca for all our resources and learning opportunities. And following today's session, you'll be invited to complete a survey to share your feedback with N4. These surveys will help us improve and seek out new webinar content and opportunities that you as an N4 member are interested in within the settlement sector, within the healthcare sector, and other sectors working directly with newcomers. And we kindly ask that you follow that link and please complete that brief survey. Thank you again for joining us, everyone. Before I close things out, are there any final comments you'd like to make, Michaël?
No, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
good day, everyone.
Take care, everybody.